Hey team, here we go again. Rightio, let's strap in for a couple of parts of building a Beaufighter. For this build I use the Tamiya 148 Beaufighter T.F Mk.X. It's built as an aircraft flown by number 489 Squadron, Royal New Zealand Air Force as part of the ANZAC Strike Wing in September 1944. So I'm planning on this being two parts. The first part, as per normal, being a bit of history. You can listen to me talk smack for a bit, and the build itself. The second part being weathering, and if we get time without it being too long, the base and how I turned aluminium foil in the water. But for now, sit back, pour a beer, and we'll crack on with some history. If you want to skip that and go straight to the build, jump forward to 6 minutes 52. Rightio, when people think of famous Second World War aircraft, names like Spitfire, Mustang, Lancaster and Messerschmitt usually spring to mind. There was another aircraft that earned a fearsome reputation, particularly among German sailors, an aircraft so heavily armed that it became known simply as the Whispering Death. Now, contrary to popular myth, there's little evidence the Japanese actually called it that, but it was a nice wartime propaganda win. So let's roll back to 1938. Bristol Aircraft needed a heavy fighter quickly. Rather than designing something brand new from scratch, they looked at their currently in service Beaufort torpedo bomber and thought, what if we pull some stuff off, put some stuff on, and threw a ton of cannon in the nose? The result was a Beaufighter. It went through a few iterations of different engines, had some underpowering issues. There was a variant with two Rolls-Royce Merlins, but when the mighty Bristol Hercules 3 radial engines came in, producing around 1700 horsepower each, the Beaufighter was in its own. The Beau was fast, rugged, and incredibly versatile. It carried a crew of two, a pilot and a navigator who also handled the radar equipment on the night fighter version. Initially, it entered service as a long-range heavy fighter and one of Britain's first successful night fighters. Thanks to airborne radars, Beaufighters hunted German bombers in darkness when most aircraft were effectively flying blind. Beaufighter maintained the night fighter role right up till the Mosquito came in. But like many great military machines, the Beau turned out to be a bit of far more than its designers originally intended. It became an escort fighter, anti-submarine aircraft, reconnaissance platform, ground attack aircraft, and perhaps most famously, a maritime strike aircraft. Think of the Beaufighter like a women's rugby forward. It's tough, could take a hit, could dish one out, was versatile, and had a strong set of legs on it. And now it's time to take our story north. By late 1943, German shipping was still moving troops, supplies, and most importantly raw materials along the Norwegian coastline. The geography heavily favoured the Germans. Deep fjords, towering mountains, and heavily defended convoys made every attack incredibly dangerous. To deal with this, RAF Coastal Command developed a new way of fighting. Instead of sending small groups of aircraft to attack heavily defended ships, entire strike wings would attack together. Different aircraft had different jobs, working as one coordinated team. One of the most famous became the ANZAC Strike Wing. Made up of number 455 Squadron, RAAF, and number 489 Squadron, RNZAF, these Australians and New Zealanders set up at RAF Langham in early 1944. They later moved to RAF Dalaki in Scotland to pursue shipping up the Norwegian coastline. Generally, the New Zealand crews flew Torbos, Beaufighters modified to carry torpedoes. The Australians flew cannon and rocket arm Beaufighters, they were the flakbusters. Imagine flying just metres above freezing North Sea water at nearly 300 miles an hour, heading directly towards a convoy whose sole purpose was to stop you from stopping them. As the formation approached, the Australians went in first. Their four 20mm Hispano cannons and later RP-3 rockets hammered every anti-aircraft gun they could find. The objective wasn't necessarily to destroy the guns, it was simply to keep the gunners' heads down for the few crucial seconds needed for the torpedo aircraft to line up on their runs. There was no room for mistakes. During the preparations for D-Day, the wing moved south to help keep German shipping away from the English Channel, preventing enemy naval forces from interfering with the invasion. Once the Allied armies had established themselves in France, the wing returned north to continue attacking shipping off Norway and the Netherlands. However, the cost was high. Flying low and straight during attack runs left crews horribly exposed to concentrated anti-aircraft fire and German fighters. Then came Black Friday. When the wing moved back to RAF Dalaki in October, they were bolstered with an RAF and a RCAF squadron, diluting the ANZAC feel and making it more of a Commonwealth Games style strike wing. On the 9th of February 1945, the wing launched an attack on German destroyers in Førdefjord in Norway. This will be known as Black Friday. Due to poor weather, even for Northern Europe in February. Low cloud and confusion over the target, the formation was split. Rather than attacking together, as they had trained countless times before, small groups of Beaufighters pressed on into some of the heaviest anti-aircraft defences in Norway. The delay caused by the weather also allowed for a group of 12 German Focke-Wulf 190s to be in the area. Without the full weight of the Strike Wing arriving simultaneously, the Germans were able to concentrate their fire on each aircraft as it appeared. 9 Beaufighters were shot down, and 26 Australian and New Zealand airmen were killed, making it the darkest single day in the history of the ANZAC Strike Wing. Some crews were killed by an aircraft fire of fighters, while others disappeared in the freezing waters of the North Sea, in which you had a very slim chance of survival. Despite these losses, Strike Wing continued flying operations. The surviving crews climbed back into their bows, knowing exactly what awaited for them over Norway. It was a testament to the professionalism, courage and determination of the Australian and New Zealand airmen, and they continued the campaign until Germany's surrender only a few months later. In the final stages of the war, numbers 455 and 489 Squadron operated from RAF Thornaby, primarily hitting German shipping trying to escape from northern German ports such as Kiel. And the Beaufighter itself. The Beaufighter may never have achieved the fame of the Spitfire or the glamour of the Mosquito. It continued to serve in the RAF, flying its last combat missions over Malaya. But if you were standing on the deck of a German merchant ship in the North Sea and heard 2 Hercules engines growling louder over the horizon, you probably weren't thinking about which aircraft won the Battle of Britain. You were thinking about the hail of Hispano cannon fire you're about to cop in the face. Rightio, let's crack on with the build. We're using the Tamiya Beaufighter T.F Mk.X. It's a good old kit, goes together well, no major fit problems. We started with the cockpit. In the cockpit I added the side panels and a few bits and pieces from the Aries resin Beaufighter detail set, and they just slotted in nicely. Just adds a little bit more detail, which you can't see much of it when she's all closed up anyway. So I've just done a little test fit with the kit instrument panels to make sure she fitted in nicely with the Aries resin side panels, and it all worked out well. Let's get some paint into the cockpit. So first off, I started with a primer coat of SMS black lacquer primer. From there, added SMS British interior. Highlights. Just added a little bit of white to the British interior, and then just a couple of lighter coats. So to add a little bit of wear and tear to the cockpit, I just did some sponge chipping, the dark brown acrylic, and then just added a little bit of finer chipping with an aluminium colour with a fine brush. Old Sydney Sweeney's out again. I focused the chipping on those higher traffic areas around the cockpit where boots and bits and pieces of zippers on flight suits would rub. So around the seats, around the footwells, and just those general high traffic areas. I replaced the pilot seat with the resin seat from the Aries set. And I painted the padding with AK Gen 3 red brown. And just added some highlights with a very old bottle of paint in my cupboard, the old Panzer Aces red leather. After this was done, gave the cockpit an overall wash of Ableton Oils bitumen. So the instrument panel had been previously primed with SMS black primer, which was a good colour match to the actual colour of the panel. I then used Tamiya acrylic NATO black on both the instrument panel and the side panels, just to add a little bit of a tonal difference to the individual plant panels. I gave the instrument panel and the side consoles just a very light dry brush with a dark grey, and then painted things like switches, throttle controls, the mixture of acrylic, yellow and red, just to make them pop a little bit. After this, I painted the instrument faces with a acrylic white, and then just put a little drop of clear gloss into each of the instruments, just to make it look all glassy. Seeing the bow is going to be posed flying, I used one of the Tamiya figures and a plus model 148 Mustang pilot with a few modifications. I added to this the seatbelts from the Aries kit and crew in the office. Now the turbos, so the torpedo arm Beaufighters, didn't have the wing-mounted .303 Brownings. So an easy way to fill this in, because I'm lazy, is a little bit of super glue on a toothpick, put it in the machine gun aperture, sand it flat, and then a little bit of putty over the top. Normally I plan my builds fairly well before I start, but this one changed plans about 3 times whilst I was building it, including having it posed flying, and so I decided to move the control surfaces. This would have been much easier done before I glued the wings together. Involved just cutting out the control surfaces, then filling and sanding where I slipped with the blade. Then I just put a little bit of styrene inside the gap and glued the control surfaces back on with a little bit of CA. Also a little bit of gap filling with some styrene at either end of the aileron. For the Bristol Hercules 3 engines, the only thing I added was a little bit of 1mm lead wire as the exhaust manifolds. This was just a case of drilling a hole in the side of the cylinder head and putting the wire in and bending it back. You can't see much of the engines, but it's just a nice little detail. The engines were base coated with SMS primer black, then dry brushed, just with lightly with a metal tone, just to get a little bit of a sheen and a little bit of detail. The gear hub was then given a coat of gloss black, and after all this was done, the whole thing was given a wash with AK aircraft engine oil. The lead wire exhaust manifolds were first painted gloss black, and then just given a few little random stipples of different rust tone oils. Then through just a light wash of a dust colour, mostly around the hub, just to give it a little bit of interest. Rightio, so clear parts are gauzy coated, masks are on, and it's time to get painting. As always, I started with a coat of SMS lacquer black primer. For the highlights, I thought I'd try something new. So I used the AK Photo Etch modelling stencils, just with some SMS insignia white over the entire aircraft. Some of the spots where I couldn't quite get the stencil into, I just highlighted and mottled by hand. But now time to crack on with some invasion stripes. I masked off the area and painted the black first. Then masked out the black and painted the white. I then highlighted a few panels with SMS Cark Black. Once this was all done, time to keep Tamiya masking tape in business. Added more tape over the whole thing, and she's ready to crack on with the actual colours. Rightio, now we're moving on to the underside colour. For this I used SMS RAF Sky. I built up the colour over several coats, several thin coats, trying to stick panel to panel and not get a bit carried away and do too much at a time. Once I had the colour down, time to move on to some highlighting. For the highlights I added a little bit of SMS insignia white to the RAF Sky and focusing on the front edge and centre of panels, slowly built up the colour. The final layer of highlights with a bit more insignia white added, I zeroed down on mainly the leading edges of the panels. And now we move to the upper surfaces. For this I used SMS Ocean Grey. Going through some of my references for this build, the Coastal Command aircraft with the single tone grey upper surfaces seem to weather differently to other aircraft. There weren't a huge amount of scuffs and scratches, more like you'd see on a modern naval aircraft, so just that sort of wear and tear on the paint. So to achieve this look, I just built up the paint in very thin layers, but rolling about 50% paint to 50% thinner. Just gradually built up the layers, going panel by panel. It's time consuming, but I was pretty happy with the result. I also use this as a way to start my weathering. So for areas where I was going to have streaks or a sort of dirt and grime, so around the edges and backs of the engines and some of the bigger panel lines, I just kept them with a little bit more of that darker shade from the base coat and the mottling. For the highlights, first couple layers, I just added a little bit of caulk sand, and once again just tightening down on a few individual panels, and the final highlight focusing on the leading edge of panels. Pretty happy with the result with this one. So I bought this kit secondhand and the decals were pretty well cactus. For the RAF roundels on the upper surfaces I used Montex masks. I had a spare set of markings for the fuselage, for their decals. As for the serial numbers, they're from the fantastic, really easy to use, one-man army, 148th RAF serial numbers. So you use the 8-inch and the 36-inch. The only problem with the 36-inch is they don't have any numbers, but thankfully an S turns into a 6 pretty damn easily. And the aircraft registration number was done using the 8-inch pencils, just masked off and sprayed with a bit of SMS Park Black. On to the engine nacelles. So the bow had a rather distinctive copper colour at the front of the engine nacelles. Looking at reference for Coastal Command Beaufighters, it was actually painted a flat, very dark grey, almost a black. So for this, first thing I did was mask off and spray SMS metallic copper with a touch of red-brown in it, just a touch. Once this was dry, gave it a coat of AK heavy chipping effects and gave her a couple of coats of SMS Cark Black. Once this was dry, got an old short brush, moistened with a bit of water, and vigorously scratched away till I got the bit of the copper to show through. Happy with the effect. Well team, that's the end of part 1. Part 2, we're going to go through the weathering, the metallic details, blurred props, the final touches, and the base. But for now, as always, relax and cue the dramatic music.